I mean, despite these very long introductions which has been given about me, what is more important is that I belong to the state of West Bengal. And you know that West Bengal is a state which is famous for Durga Puja. And during the Durga Puja, one of the characteristic features that we have is that we used to get our new clothes during the puja time. And we really, I as a kid used to wait for that coveted moment of getting that clothes and wait for almost, I would say 7 or 8 months, almost 11 months in the year for that single piece of trouser or single piece of shirt that I'm going to get out of that. And I think you have had the opportunity to hear from Anuj, you have had the opportunity to hear from Ripu about the life cycle of a cloth. And we are actually used to that because I was just from my very childhood was used to just 1 or just 2 shirts a year and 1 trousers perhaps, and which I have been using for say 3-4 years continuously. And once the trouser actually gets older, as you have rightly said, that now this trouser gets cut, we used to normally give it to our people, those who are working over there. They used to again make use of that further gets converted to pieces, and then finally I think it lands as a mop. That's what exactly the life cycle which Anuj has talked about. But if this is the culture and this is the tradition which we are actually used to, then why are we running behind this Zara, this Li and Fang, and this Walmart just because they are selling us cheap clothes, just because they are selling us clothes which are trendy? What exactly are the choices that we are actually making here? So I think the presentation which I'm going to give here today is basically that about the fast fashion. So the clothes that we choose to wear, and it's time that we go back to our roots. So you can see that we are the voracious consumers of fast and cheap clothes. Our wardrobe changes very frequently. The make, do, and mend culture, which Anuj has talked about very nicely, has literally disappeared. And we are leaving tons of debris of waste in the landfill as we fail to recycle lion's share of what we discard. Have any one of you been to a landfill? Have you seen that site? Have you been to a landfill? Any one of you? None of you. So I teach a course called Human Dimensions of Sustainability in the program on MBA in Business Sustainability that I'm currently looking at. So one of the important components when we talk about a problem like climate change, the first important component that comes to your mind is this engagement with the stakeholder. Who are the people who are involved in causing the problem? Who are the people who are affected by the problem? So those are the kind of stuff which comes to the forefront. So the first important lessons that the students learn out of stakeholder engagement is that I forcefully send them, a few of the groups, to a site of the landfill. And when they actually get to see the site of the landfill, they understand what waste actually means and they get aghast by that. So, and when they go for the first journey of interacting with the waste pickers, the guys who are working in the landfill, what they get to start by saying, sir, they are not even allowing me to talk to them because these guys themselves feel that they are totally criminalized. They themselves feel like they are like dregs of the society. They themselves feel that they are like a taboo. I mean, they can't interact with the common people. So that was an assignment which was given to them for credit because they won't get any marks if they don't submit that assignment. So you can very well understand that any student, any MBA student for that matter, grades for them is very critical because without that grades, they won't get a good job. And good job is what they're looking for finally. So I told them that you have to complete this assignment. I don't know how, but you have to go and get this stakeholder engagement done. So these guys went to that landfill site. And first what they were like, they were also kind of moving around sheepishly around that landfill site with all these guys. And these guys were looking at them like this. And then what they did was that they started soiling their hands in the huge piles of the debris, moving their hands around. And when these guys like started saying, oh, ये लोग तो फिर waste, I think they are हाथ से waste से हाथ गंदा कर रहे हैं. Then they came and नहीं आप हाथ क्यों गंदा कर रहे हो, हाथ क्यों गंदा कर रहे हो. That's how the first interaction starts. And that's when you understand what a landfill is, and that's when you understand that who are the guys who are working in the landfill. And that's when you understand that how actually you need to bring about, and they were just reporting to me that in the landfill waste, quite a significant proportion of that landfill waste is comprised of that fashion garments, those small tuta-wuta pieces and all that. They were like piled up like debris in that. So that's where I think the whole exercise starts. So now these are the 4 words which we get to see in defining the fast fashions. It's quick, cheap, mass-produced, and trendy. Look at the word mass-produced. Why? It's not mass-produced because they want to produce it or they want to kind of pump it into the system. It's because we are choosing that clothes. Without the demand, supply cannot happen. So the first important thing that comes is that we have made our choice of going for this cheaper and trendy clothes. Now, let's look at this startling fact. Now, you know that one of the important reasons you'll find most of the discussions and one of the important point of negotiations of climate change is that the exponential growth rate of populations, and obviously as the population grows exponentially, they will use more energy, they will use more resources, and that's a major cause of climate change. That's what we are talking about. But what is startling here is that if you look at the growth of the textile production over the last almost from 1970 to 2015, I have given the data here, from 2010 onwards, the growth of the textile garment, particularly this garment industry, it has totally offset and crossed even the level of exponential growth of population. And that's one of the startling fact which can categorically tells you that where we are actually currently standing in terms of the problems. Now, let me just kind of show you, obviously since I'm an economist and a person who comes from the policy background, so some of the statistics will also help you to understand that where we are actually currently standing. So more than $500 billion of value is lost every year due to clothing underutilizations and lack of recycling. Because you know that whatever clothes, as we have been talking about that life cycle of a cloth, from moving from the clothes that we wear till the point that it gets converted to a mop, it doesn't even go to a mop stage at all. What happens is that if we buy one particular t-shirt, we discard it within just a span of 2 months. We change our wardrobe every 2 months, every 3 months perhaps. And that's creating the whole bunch of problems. We just discard them like that. And most of them cannot even be, when I was just talking to some of the recyclers, they were just telling me that, I mean, sir, all these clothes are simply, they are so, they're not even durable. They cannot even be reused for that purpose. For any other purpose, they cannot be reprocessed. We can't even break them into pieces and create a new piece out of that. They have to be thrown out. That's the simple thing which I get to hear. And these sorting facilities were actually giving that kind of a feedback. And if you look at, if this is the way we are actually going, then obviously by 2050, that was the calculations which was brought out by World Economic Forum, they will actually use more than a quarter of the global carbon budget, which is associated with a 2 degrees centigrade temperature rise. Now, when we talk about climate change, the first important stuff that comes to our mind is that it causes global warming. And there's a threshold temperature that's there in our mind, and that is 2 degrees Celsius. And even the recent IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change report, is not talking even of 2 degrees Celsius. They're talking of 1.5 degrees Celsius. The word net zero that you get to hear most often is talking about 1.5 degrees Celsius, not 2 degrees Celsius. Now, if we are actually moving in the way we are doing, then obviously we are going to eat up 1/4 of our carbon budget, if the graph which I have shown, and if that is the way we are actually moving right now. So have we tried to, the more important part is that, have we really tried to actually gauge the true cost of our choice? The important part is not the price tag, or important part is not the price that we are paying right when we are picking up from the shelf. The important part is the behind the scenes. Anuj will understand much better because he has been preparing all those behind the scenes. And behind the scenes precisely means that we have a whole bunch of environmental impact of these textiles because of the usage of water, because of the usage of land, because of the usage of chemicals. So you can see that this statistics categorically shows you that we use around 79 billion cubic meters of water. Even by 2015, we have already used it up, and around 2,700 liters of water are basically used to just manufacture one t-shirt, which is equivalent to providing 2.5 years of potable drinking water for one individual. So you can understand the magnitude of the problem. The second one, if you're looking at the impact in terms of the global greenhouse, it's around 10%, which the fashion industry is currently contributing, and that is more than if you sum up the total emissions which comes from your maritime as well as the air travels. And finally, the last part of it is obviously the microfibers, which basically comes out when you actually wash those clothes. Because you know that if you have heard about these stone wash jeans, and with the different process of washing that goes into the whole part of preparing a jean, that basically results in release of these tons of microfibers. And obviously, and what happens as a result of that is that around 35% of the microplastics that actually went to the oceans is attributed to this washing process that is usually followed in the cloth while preparing the cloth. This is just the comparisons between a t-shirt and a jeans, and you can see that in the process of just preparing stage, the consumption is around 50% of the total CO2 emissions that comes out of a t-shirt. Similarly, in the case of jeans, it is around 57%. So the upstream emissions is around 70%, which comes from these energy-intensive raw material production and processing. And the basic point is that these are mainly these polythenes are nothing but they are made out of petrochemicals. And we use fossil fuels in the entire value chain of preparation of just a single piece of cloth. So that's one of the biggest culprit which is causing the problem of climate change, because the usage of the fossil fuels that we are using while manufacturing the cloth is causing the major problem of climate change. And what we are doing about it, we have got to hear in the morning from the solar man, we've got to hear from some of the phenomenal speakers about the organic farming. We have got to hear from the solar farming. So solar potentials that India has got and how we can make use of that. All these can be integrated in the process of upstream to actually reduce that. So what can we do about it? And I'll just take the examples of some of the global brands, because these are some of the examples which has touched me, and I thought I'll share that with you. So this comes from a wonderful ad on Black Friday ad, we call it Black Friday ad in New York Times by Patagonia. So Patagonia is basically the person who owns the Patagonia, himself is a rock climber, and he's an environmental activist by his heart. So the first thing which he's trying to convey with that if you don't really need that jacket, don't buy it, simply. As simple. So the basic question is that do we really need that or not? So here, he has been brave enough with this campaign just to point out that, and he has been quite bold enough to come in the market, to come out with this campaign to point out that don't buy my jacket. So people started thinking, well, this will lead to a phenomenal reductions in terms of sales for this jacket, because if the person who is creating the jacket is telling you that don't buy my jacket, then obviously it amounts to, he's just calling for the disasters. Now take it from me. There has been a soaring of sales of this jacket immediately after that. And the person, just before he retired, has completely surrendered all his fortune. He's a billionaire. Fortune basically to a trust which is working for the cause of climate change. So you can very well understand that it was very much in the DNA. So that's why I thought it would be worthwhile sharing this example. Another classic case, these I usually share with my students in the classrooms. We have heard about Puma, and this is a global brand. And we know very well Puma and Nike are something which, as young people, it fascinates us. But Puma has been the first and the bold brand which actually has revealed the entire carbon and environmental footprints just below the sole of a shoe. So when you are buying that shoe, you just turn it around, you can see that it's the entire carbon footprint is basically the entire environmental footprint, the ecological footprint is completely given there. And they come out with their environmental profit and loss statements, which they share with all the stakeholders. There also people started thinking that, well, I think they are first movers in terms of coming out with their environmental profit and loss statements, I think, and they are coming out with that revelations that they are using so much of carbon in the whole process, they are using so much of water. The very fact that I am revealing that means I know what I'm doing. And when a consumer gets to see that you are using this much of water and this much of fossil fuels in your supply chain, then obviously they know that you are going to do something about it, and they are, with the first process of this accounting framework, actually kind of tinkered with the mindset of the other producers of shoes and apparels that they can actually follow suit. And some of them have actually followed suit. Nike has followed suit. Nike has followed suit. Reebok has followed suit. So, I mean, another important initiative which I thought would be interesting to look at would be that when we ask these consumers that why are you buying that, then they will say that I am getting my choicest clothes, and sometimes they don't, even if they don't buy the say designer clothes by a Ritu Kumar collections or something like that, but they would love to buy a designer clothes. So this startup called My Wardrobe, basically what they have done is that they'll go for a rental model. This is one of the business models which currently is coming out in a very big way, where if you really want to wear that particular cloth, if you're really fascinated by that, you can actually take it on rent and return it back. Why buy it? So I'm afraid we in India have not really got ourselves acclimatized with that culture of a rental, but there are some of the startups, and I have been in touch with them, who are coming out with this idea of renting out clothes and renting out designer clothes actually. So, but in Netherlands, I think one of you have been there. In Norway, I have seen some of these shops, and there's a huge amount of demand for these rentals. And I think we can follow suit. Now, let me just take some of the classic examples from Indian ventures. So I think Goonj is one of the ventures I'm sure most of you know about. It's basically headed by Anshu Gupta, who is the Ramon Magsaysay Award winner. It's one of the finest entrepreneurs I have come across. In fact, when I teach my social entrepreneurship course, as a first introduction to the course, I take them to the sorting facility at Sarita Vihar. What he does is that he basically he tells me that you give me all your clothes. Whatever clothes you have used, you give back to me. And now what they do usually is that out of that cloth, they call it upcycling. They reprocess and recreate that clothes. And that is usually given to the villagers as a currency. How they do it? They go to the far-off villages and they ask the villagers to identify their own problem, which they have not been able to solve for the years. So, and they said that you are going to get paid for that. So he don't categorically tell them you're going to pay in terms of cash or something like that, but he tells them that you're going to get remunerated for that. The first thing they do is that they identify the villagers, they identify their own problems, and then once that problem is actually solved by them, they get their payments in the form of clothes. That's what they do. These reprocessed or these recreated clothes is what they get. So cloth is actually, he's called the clothing man of India. You have come across the solar man and the pond man. He's called the clothing man. So I thought it would be worthwhile sharing this experience with you as well. So Kunj is a classic example where they are trying to bring dignity into the life of the people without actually compromising in terms of what it actually is the life they are actually looking for. Now, there are some other examples like Doodlage, which is mainly upcycling waste. I would not like to spend too much time on that, but this is what I can relate to particularly in terms of these classic examples of this startup called Lata Sita. You know that because of this Durga Puja, we actually generate a huge amount of clothing waste because the deity is actually decorated with the clothings. Then we obviously use the clothings to create and recreate the pandals, and obviously post that, everything goes actually as a waste, or everything goes primarily to the dump or the landfill. Now, Lata Sita's initiative was primarily to basically make use of those clothes which are actually used for the pandals to actually recreate new creative clothes. So some of the designer wear you can get to see out of that, it's a patchwork. And let me tell you categorically that when I used to shiver in cold during winter, my grandmother used to provide me with a katha. This is the word. Katha means it's a quilt very indigenously created and all that. And it's not the case that he created that katha, she weaved that katha out afresh. What she did was that there were some old clothes that were lying in the wardrobe, and those old clothes actually got connected one by one to create a panoramic quilt, something like that, which you can see. This is a designer one. Obviously, we are using a designer piece here, but what she was doing very much in the household was that she was creating a quilt out of those small pieces. And finally, obviously, instead of buying those quilt from outside, we were using that katha. And that's what we were used to. So I think currently what we are doing is that these startups are trying to bring those cultures back and unfortunately now you have to buy those kathas from the market from them. That's a sorry state of affairs, but this is what we were used to, because we have actually forgotten we are oblivious of what we were originally meant for in terms of inculcating the values of sustainability right from our childhood days. I don't know, because I still remember that what Dr. Attenborough said during the COP25, I think just before COP25, he said that we have lived in an era of crisis, but we want to live for you an era of solutions. So I think the process starts right from here, and I'm glad that some of these initiatives are coming up. What I'd like to draw your quick attention to is that how many of you have heard about the word geographical indications? We talk about khadis pretty often, and we say that we must. I mean, it's like a fascinations that we should be getting back to our own traditional khadi. That's fine. But how many of you have heard about the word geographical indications? Have you heard about it? Yes. I think you can see there you have the entire range of textiles that the whole country is producing, right from Pashmina in Kashmir to the Kanjivaram silk in the south. Now, the interesting part is that despite, I mean, only one hand was actually up when we are talking about geographical indications. Unfortunately, despite having the wealth and treasure trove within the country in itself, as we can see from this map, have we been able to exploit that in our own country? Have there been a demand for those? Why our choices is driven by most of the multinational companies in the West who are selling fast and cheap clothing to us? If I talk to some of the people whom I have interacted with in the context of geographical indications, are people who are primarily from the West. They have a craving for these clothes which are having this geographical indication tag. And these are basically unique to the culture, the topography, and the fantastic heritage that each of these places were actually having. And each of these textiles are related to a very unique way that these artisans were preparing them. So the fundamental question that comes to the point is, if you are really trying to address these choices, if you are really trying to say that we should use our resources more responsibly, we should produce more responsibly, we should consume more responsibly, the first journey begins from here with our own textiles, which we have throughout the country. Are we actually ready for that? That's a bigger question. So it's a time for reflections. Another important startling thing which I would like to talk about before I end off is that when, you know that the important part of the apparel is the apparel value chain, and how this cheaper and fast clothing is actually produced. You see, most of the time, this fabric is actually outsourced to a least developed country like Bangladesh or Vietnam. And in Bangladesh or Vietnam, they don't have any environment, health, and safety standards in the factories that they are working on. They have absolutely no laws with respect to the stringency in terms of the environment. And when it comes to the living wage, most of these workers who are working in these factories don't even get a living wage. And when this Rana Garment and Tajreen factory tragedy happened, And it's one of the classic examples which we all know of, that the entire factory got gutted. So despite knowing that there was a crack in the whole building, despite the fact that it was brought to the notice of the authority, they were just completely nonchalant about it. Neither is the owner of the factory was aware of it. So as a result of which, the entire factory collapsed. In fact, it was gutted out, and leading to loss of lives of thousands and thousands of people. That was precisely the case. Question is, who can we blame for that? Is it the government? Is it the owner of the factory? Is it the people at large? Or who actually? Is it the consumers? It's primarily the consumers, because we are choosing that clothes, and that goes back down to the value chains to a Bangladesh factory where most of these migrant workers from the villages, primarily women, are working. So we are actually making the choice. So we can really bring about the changes which you would like to. If you really want to bring about the transformations, we can start it right from here by choosing our own clothes, by choosing our own textiles, by resorting to our own cultural, very rich heritage that we have, rather than allowing this to go in the form of exports to the foreign countries where the people are choosing this. So with that, I would like to end my talk. And thank you very much.